what I realized is that managing that data was not the typical type of thing that we normally do in real estate, which is work with statistics and spreadsheets and just kind of boil everything down to kind of one number. What I realized is that that was really a data science exercise. And that's what really led me to pursue, a path in technology as opposed to traditional real estate.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of Buildings 2.0. Today, I'm speaking with Serge Reda, the new technology committee chair at the Real Estate Institute and the co-founder of AlphaRithm AI. Serge, thanks for chatting with me.
Jose, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So before you started your journey, we'll dive into AlphaRithm, but take us back. You started as an architect, moved into real estate. You sat on different sides of the table.
Many years ago, I studied architecture, got my Master of Architecture degree, never practiced as an architect, but instead went right into real estate development. Started out as a project manager, but very shortly thereafter, realized I didn't know anything about finance. So I got my MBA in finance at Fordham University. And then since then, I've been, basically the last 22 years up through let's call it the end of 2022, I was doing mostly, traditional real estate investment, acquisitions, development management, some asset management. But then for the last 5 years of that 22-year run, I had an opportunity at the last company that I worked for, a publicly traded REIT, to manage a very large construction cost contract invoice data set. And at that time, around 2018-ish or so, or just before that, I had learned Python, the programming language Python, really as a personal interest, not for any particular use professionally at that time. But then after that, when I inherited the role of managing all of this construction data, what I realized is that managing that data was not the typical type of thing that we normally do in real estate, which is work with statistics and spreadsheets and just kind of boil everything down to kind of one number. What I realized is that that was really a data science exercise. And that's what really led me to pursue, a path in technology as opposed to traditional real estate. And I think, Jose, that's something you could certainly understand for sure. But I strongly believe that while the role of technology in the commercial real estate industry may still be in a nascent kind of state, it certainly is the future of the industry. And that's why I chose to pursue it. So for really the second half of my career, that's my focus.
Dive in deeper. So, you were diving into construction data. Was there anything that stood out to you as like, holy moly, like someone should be paying attention to this?
Absolutely. The real moment that I realized that there was a lot more to understand was that the core of the task initially was to aggregate costs and basically understand how much was spent at certain times and on what projects. But there were so many other dimensions within the data that were not being explored, not the least of which was geography, not the least of which was how to integrate just the construction cost and payment and contract data with other silos of the company, like leasing, like asset management, and accounting, of course. But one of the key things that the data science element, incorporating a data science approach to this exercise was to have a deep lens into the risk of these construction projects. And part of that was incorporating other data sets from other silos within the company to understand things like timelines, market costs, market opportunities that may or may not be missed, or other risks that are inherent in the delivery of a space to a tenant. So the data science element of it really allowed for a deep lens into that risk analysis that I think would have been very, very difficult or impossible to do without it.
You mentioned having access to the data, but also in the same sentence talked about the silos that are inherent within these firms. I suspect, real estate and it being siloed and disconnected and fragmented is nothing new. My suspicion is that it has to be both technology as well as an evolution in business model. You can have a brand new toy, but if that brand new toy is just in a completely broken system, it doesn't really matter. But I'm curious, are there examples of players in your space that are doing it right, that are, evolving both the business model as well as technology, or any examples of maybe on a per project or on a company basis?
Yes. And so to the point about this sort of industry structure and the business model, the reality of this all is that sort of the core of commercial real estate or really any real estate investing, but particularly commercial real estate, is that it takes a large amount of capital. And so access to capital is key. Really, the only other end to that is access to opportunity. And putting those two things together, right, marrying the capital with the opportunity has been really the core of what commercial real estate has been since the beginning of time, right? And we know that real estate is a very, very old and established industry. And so, like you say, the analogy of sort of having a new toy in a very old system is it just, there's a lot of conflict that happens there. I'm not really one to say whether or not the industry is broken and needs new tools in order to make it work correctly again. The question for me is, can technology allow somebody in commercial real estate, an organization or a person or whomever, to do something they couldn't do before that offers them such a competitive advantage that they just simply can't do it without the technology, or they wouldn't be able to gain that competitive advantage somehow without that technology? Sometimes, and or really in most industries, what certainly everybody is seeing is that the early adopters of something, whatever that is, and it may be technology, and the truth is most of the time it is technology in many other industries, the early adopters take the risk of adopting that technology. But what ends up happening later on is that for everybody else, which is most of the industry that did not adopt early, the competitive advantage that's enjoyed by the early adopters just ends up becoming a cost of doing business later on by all the ones that did not adopt it. And while we've seen lots of technology come through commercial real estate, some of it has just been a cost of doing business. And that's gone back in time. But now that we are in a totally different era, first, the new era was the internet. Now the newest era is artificial intelligence. And of course, the next new era is quantum computing, which is some time away. But looking into the future, the early adopters of those very complex technologies are going to end up causing the rest of the industry to have a cost of doing business that unless they start adopting, or at least thinking about those new technologies now, are going to end up, just either having higher costs or becoming obsolete. Now, there are some in the industry that are trying to adopt this. Now, we know about some of the very large companies, some of whom have actually built their own technology products. And, that's obviously at the very, very cutting edge. But the truth is that just the general population or in any industry or in the world end up hearing about new technologies being adopted when in fact it's been going on for a decade, And I mention that because you asked, are there particular players in the industry that are doing it? Without naming any names, I think there are many elements within the commercial real estate ecosystem that have been trying to figure out ways of working with, say, artificial intelligence for a decade now. And it seems like artificial intelligence is new. It's really not, and I only bring up artificial intelligence because that's something that AlphaRithm AI is deeply interested in, if you couldn't tell from the name. It seems like it's new, but it's really not. That goes back to the point of the early adopters pushing the envelope of their own capabilities and leveraging technology to really push the limit of what it can do and to see how it can influence the industry at large. But, and the last thing I'll say about this before we move on, is that adopting new technologies these days, particularly artificial intelligence or many, many other tools, just like integrated projects, is not necessarily a high budget item. These types of tools are something that I think will eventually, if not now, especially with regard to integrated projects, provide real immediate value right now. Something like artificial intelligence, Chat GPT and other similar types of tools have been unleashed onto the world something like the last year. And so we feel like that it's new. It's really not. It's just been opened up to the general population to use, and it feels really new. What's difficult is finding ways to use tools directly in the operations of commercial real estate business, which goes back to the heavily siloed nature of the industry. There are some that are trying to break down those silos, but it's very hard to do because we end up being very specialized, and it takes somebody that can see the whole big picture of the ecosystem, put it all together and understand how technology tools can benefit the overall organization and their specific business strategy overall.
All right, so you got us here. So now we're going to go deeper on AI here. But I recently saw a post on LinkedIn that I thought was really, really kind of crystallized, I think, an idea about early adopters versus mass adoption. And if you consider the chapter we're in now with AI in real estate, it's not surprising. You always have a group of early adopters where they're naturally looking for use cases, divergent thinking. I think perhaps not AI, but tangential to this is Apple launching the new Vision Pro, right? Who are the folks currently buying this or making reviews? It's folks that are naturally early adopters. They're looking for use cases. They're making reviews about like, hey, it could do this, it could do that. But if I compare early adopters with, say, my grandmother, right, who, as incredibly smart as she is, she would need somebody to tell her, hey, you need to use it for this. And then maybe she'd adopt it. Meaning, for there's a large part of the market that needs to be told, hey, you could do this thing doing this. Right now, we're not there yet, right? Right now, it's a very, here's a prompt bar, good luck, ask it questions and figure out what to do with it, right? So I feel like that's kind of where we're at. And naturally, I think there's going to be a time when the packaging of this becomes a lot more do this and you get that. We're not there yet, I think. In your context, how do you think about, maybe this is a two-part question, AlphaRithm is focused on early adopters. Walk us through your thought process. Right now, what can be done and perhaps for who around the real estate table?
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's, especially with regard to artificial intelligence, and maybe we'll stick with that just for the moment, because it just, not only is it a very sort of hot and sexy buzzword, but it's here to stay, right? We know that. Just the users of the most basic large language model, artificial intelligence tools has just exploded. So I think in the mentality of people, and commercial real estate folks are people just like everybody else, right? They see that there's an opportunity here, but they're not sure, well, how can I use that? There have been some people talking about how to do it, but I would consider that to be not the most valuable. It's the lowest hanging fruit that may be easy to understand how to use or incorporate. Like, people are starting to talk about chatbots in commercial real estate, but chatbots have been around for a really long time in other industries. So it's not exactly, the most innovative or what I would even consider to be early adopter approach. There have been plenty of commercial real estate companies that have incorporated things like chatbots into their own operations, particularly when it is tenant facing or user facing. And that's nothing new. The banking industry has been doing that for decades. So it's not exactly, but so to the point of how can I do it? One thing that we do at AlphaRithm is we are not an artificial intelligence company. We don't create artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of myths and a lot of misunderstanding about what artificial intelligence is, the core of which is machine learning models. And we do recognize that we are going to have to build some machine learning models of our own, not because we want to become an artificial intelligence company, but because the tools that exist out there right now that we can incorporate into our algorithms are not quite what we need in order to then offer the commercial real estate what it needs. The commercial real estate industry is not really a large language model industry. It's a much more scientific and analytically focused industry. And so while the large language aspect of it might be fun and interesting, and maybe some of the facets or some of the folks in the commercial real estate industry, such as brokers and agents and salespeople, they may find that to be a much more relevant tool, which is good for them. For the rest of us that work what I'll call on the back end of it, the investment side of it, the operations side of it, we don't quite have the tools that are ready to plug and play yet, like ChatGPT, right? That's a large language model, and the name of it, large language, is exactly what it is. When it comes to analysis and things like that, I think we're still at the point where custom tools have to be built. So what AlphaRithm AI is trying to do is to tap into all of those different other models, those more analytical models out there. When I say models, I mean like machine learning models that can do the hard task of getting to that deep lensing that we talked a little bit about before from a data science perspective, and then being able to, in some ways, repackage it in a way that is customized to the users within the commercial real estate industry. The commercial real estate industry is highly specialized. There are very few skills that can be transferred into other industries. It's just so specialized. And because it's so specialized, we need highly specialized tools. So there's going to take some work to focus on how do we get quote unquote standardized tools. And when I say tools, I mean like machine learning and artificial intelligence, and even tools like augmented reality or virtual reality, which you mentioned just a few minutes ago with regard to the Apple headsets and things like that. That's just another one of those technologies. It looks really good. We can imagine how we may be able to use it, but the implementation of the tools that exist right now at this moment, as we speak today, is still pretty difficult, and I'm thinking of other things like computer vision, something that you're very, very familiar with, things like that. I don't think that there's a shortage of imagination in the commercial real estate industry. I think that finding the right tools to fit that future that we can imagine right now, there's a gap there right now. And developing some of those tools that are really specifically made for the commercial real estate industry have just not quite been created yet. Will AlphaRithm AI create those tools? I'm not sure. But one thing I can tell you is that the industry, when I say the industry, I mean the machine learning and artificial intelligence industry, along with augmented reality, virtual reality, computer vision, that kind of stuff, is all evolving very, very rapidly behind the scenes. And so AlphaRithm AI is trying to position itself as a more flexible player in order to rapidly incorporate those tools that are being created to use in the commercial real estate industry directly. And eventually, I think those tools will become standardized as more and more users in the commercial real estate industry adopt them, right? So it takes some pioneers. I'd like to think AlphaRithm AI is a pioneer in that we're trying to figure out a way to bring all of those tools that are very sophisticated that we ourselves can't really create, but where we're instrumental is finding ways to incorporate them into the business processes within the commercial real estate industry that we're very, very familiar with, of which we have extreme domain knowledge.
To put myself in the shoes of a institutional commercial landlord right now, I'm facing a perfect storm of sky-high interest rates. The cost of borrowing is more expensive than it's been in a really long time. No one's renting my space if it's commercial office. All the while, everyone's looking for housing. I've been pitched for years the adoption of prop tech and, been promised the world of just adopt this point solution or that point solution. And, the end of change orders as we know it will be, finished. And somehow we're, in many ways, construction or just development hasn't evolved much despite kind of an influx of software. So if I'm an owner, what have I gotten wrong? What is these particular chapters in software, what gotten wrong or maybe missed?
It's a great question. I think that requires taking a look at the technology industry, which I don't want to say I've gotten smart about, but I've learned a lot about. And I think I'm still somewhere on that learning curve for sure, but I've gotten quite a ways up that learning curve. You're obviously way ahead of me, from what you've done. But what I've learned about the technology industry is that the capital that is supplied in order to create a technology tool is focused on finding a solution that can be easily understood, right? A story that's easy to tell. Commercial real estate is an unbelievably complex ecosystem. There's so many moving parts. Unlike, like, say, digital businesses, right? Or where sort of our core concern is traffic to our website, right? Like visitor traffic to our website. We not only are interested in that in commercial real estate industry, but we're also interested in the physical world. We've got parts, pieces, and fragments that we've got to put together to make a building. We've got human beings that move very rapidly through a very fixed built environment. We've got layer upon layer of the urban environment that have to be coordinated just to get a building to the point where it can be occupied. So the ecosystem of the commercial real estate industry is just enormous. And that's a very hard thing to express in one technology product, which is why it hasn't been created yet, right? And maybe there's no possible way to make, one ring to rule them all, just to take a Lord of the Rings analogy there. And so because of that, the simpler story is going to win the capital. And because of that, most of the prop tech companies, no fault of any prop tech company, has possibly started out with a giant comprehensive solution, but the capital forces it into a much more easily understood story. And what we've ended up with, and you and I have spoken about this ad nauseum, is now we have a prop tech industry that's got mostly single use or single purpose, for lack of a better word, applications, right? They're applied to just kind of like doing one thing. That makes it really tough, right? Imagine a car, and imagine if you had to go to a different mechanic every time you had to do something. You have to fix the brakes, you have to go over here. You have to, fix the engine, you go over there. You have to fix this, you go over there. Now, while that may be true to a degree in the auto industry, when it comes to the mechanics of the car, you go to one mechanic and they kind of do everything, right? We're not quite there yet, or maybe not even close yet in the prop tech industry. So unless we've got an organization that is building their own comprehensive tool that just does what it needs to do for its own business strategy, there's no one solution out there that can encompass the entire commercial real estate industry. And then to the point I just made, every player, every company, when I say player, I mean everybody that wants to have a go at like getting some share of the commercial real estate pie is going to have its own playbook. And that playbook is maybe just a slight variation on other playbooks, or maybe it's a whole new playbook. But I haven't seen a really new playbook in commercial real estate in my career. And perhaps technology is a way that a new playbook could be created, but I think it's going to take not only just some creativity on the part of the building owners, but someone in the industry that has domain knowledge and technology knowledge that can guide them into how they can actually make a new playbook by leveraging technology. And that just goes back to our discussion just a few minutes ago.
I think what you're highlighting is important, and it checks out with what my hunch is for the next chapter of whatever we're calling it, prop tech or technology for the built environment. My hunch is that we're going to evolve from building interfaces for people, which I would argue in the last 5-10 years, much of technology has been building interfaces, combined with, to your point, building point solutions, building a lot of tools. The challenge is when you have a real estate firm and everyone seems to have adopted software by now. And, some have more, some have less. But at this point, what I typically hear from folks around the table sounds something like, please don't come at me with yet another subscription to yet another tool that promises this and this and this. They've already got 17 different softwares across 6 different departments, none of which are playing nice with each other. And my hunch is that I think that folks have been SaaS'd to death, promised just use this one or this one. And I think that technology companies have to evolve from software as a service to software that actually moves services, that facilitates things in the real world. There's examples of this, right? You got the Uber moving riders and drivers. You got Airbnb moving guests and hosts. You've got Amazon moving packages A to B. There's software, sure, there's an interface, but there's an entire underlying infrastructure to do stuff. Now, when you consider real estate, the core product is brick and mortar, it's stuff. It breaks, right? it moves, it changes, it evolves. I think that this next chapter has to have companies that are moving stuff in real life and not just interfaces. And maybe one step beyond that is going from just a tool so that you can learn how to use, going back to your mechanic. One thing is selling someone a hammer, and another tool, and then essentially telling them, go figure it out. To people just being like, look, I could buy 17 other hammers. I'd rather just pay the mechanic. Just do it. And I think that AI is facilitating this evolution, because now, we go from building interfaces to just AI just kind of getting us to the conclusion. Am I getting it wrong? Like, what am I missing?
I don't think you're missing anything, but it's not that you yourself are missing it. It's just that you didn't say it. And that word is data, right? I mean, and that's another thing you and I have spoken about at length. And so it's true, right? The industry is very siloed, and each silo, yes, has adopted some level of SaaS product. And granted, I firmly believe that most users use only a fraction of what the SaaS product really does. Why? Because they have to learn it. And two, learn, the actual how to use it, but two is to how to make it valuable. Like, what's the real value in it? It might do something, but if it's not really going to add any value, they're just not going to do it, for the sake of doing it. And so while there are all these different solutions out there that don't talk to each other, and I think from a technology perspective, from a technology business perspective, there's an incentive not to talk to each other, right? Sometimes there is an incentive to talk to each other. Sometimes there's a disincentive, right? Sometimes there's an incentive to not integrate. And that's what we're missing, right? We're missing that connective tissue between all these different SaaS applications, or SaaS products. But that's never going to happen, right? We can't really make that happen. And so going back to my construction data exercise, what I learned is that, nope, this construction software isn't going to talk to that payments software. They're never going to make an integration, and they're never going to do it. So I had to find a workaround, and the workaround to that was getting right down to the data itself. And my tool of choice at that time, and would probably be today, is Python. That's what Python does, right? Once we have a good understanding of what the data is, we have people that understand how to do something, with that data. And so the one missing element that you know about, and we all know about, that just wasn't said, is that what it comes down to is figuring out a way to manipulate the data. There has to be that, maybe if there's no connective tissue from a technology standpoint that is going to make every one of these many, many, many SaaS products work all together, then if we boil everything that's being done into those, from those SaaS products down to its data, raw data format, then it takes somebody to say, okay, I understand you've got all this data at all the from all these different SaaS products. Now there has to be somebody that could put all that together. That's a very valuable exercise. And in the commercial industry, that's what's missing. Looking a little bit more closely at my career here. So towards the end of 2022, the last company that I worked for was sold, and the company closed. It was sold off into parts, and it ceased to exist. That's when I decided I'm focusing on data and technology as a career path. What I found out is that in the commercial real estate industry, unlike other industries, there are few to no roles for people that are skilled, like myself, in leveraging technology to leverage the data that many technology companies have. Therefore, there was no job. There are no roles to have, because the industry hasn't evolved yet to recognize that it's got lots of data, and what it needs is that one extra person in there to pull all that data together. I think that's the creative part that the industry is just not recognizing, where they could really tap into their own data. I'm not saying it's not being done. It is being done. But because it's such a valuable role, that once it's filled, there are no roles, right? So that's what's happening right now. And I think that once some companies recognize that other companies have started doing this and they're deriving a huge benefit from it, then they'll jump in and start hiring people that actually have some domain experience, but also have technology experience, like myself, But then again, the demand and the supply aren't matched up. We don't have a lot of supply of the jobs, right? Because the demand isn't there, because there aren't a lot of people like me in the industry that actually have domain knowledge, but also have direct technology experience. So while there may be companies that want to fill those roles, there aren't a lot of people out there demanding them because they don't have quite the skill set to fill it. And so I think we're just at the very beginning of that. And, at Fordham, I teach a few classes. And now that I'm the new chair of this technology committee of the board of the Real Estate Institute, one of the things that I have been focused on is how can we get the students out there with a highly competitive skill set. And technology is one of those skill sets that I think is really important to have. We could talk all day about what that technology skill set is, but as time goes on, the industry will evolve to have technology folks that sit in seats, not as consultants, but as actual employees. And so going back to the original question, it's understanding how to manipulate and derive something from the data, regardless of whether or not you've got 10 or 100 SaaS products. They still all collect and then contain data that we can then tap into. But I think the skill set isn't within the companies yet in order to do that. And I know that firsthand, because on the technology side, people don't want anybody that has real estate skills because it's so specialized. In the real estate industry, the people that are doing the hiring don't understand how somebody with technology skills could add value, no matter how much I and others like me have tried to explain it. And so I think that certainly will evolve. And that, I think, is the future, right? The core data analysis, understanding where the data in companies is contained, how to extract it from those silos and bring it down into one main repository and then utilize it from there, is what the industry needs. I did it at my last company. I wasn't asked to do it. I just knew that it was something that had to be done. But I think the owners and operators have to say, what do I need at my company right now to make use of all the data that I have? And that has to be done right now.
But before we hop here, show us the promised land. So assuming that we have owners, developers that are looking to proactively consolidate their data across these silos, assuming that they bring in, whether it's a role or strategic roles, to look at this data, collect it, organize it, make sense of it, what's that mean for buildings? What could that mean for buildings?
From an operations standpoint, right? I guess let's just focus on that, leaving aside the whole investment side of it, from an operations standpoint, which has to go on until a building is 100% obsolete, right? If you have one tenant in a building, it still has to be operated, regardless of how much space you've got. I guess I'll just make one analogy, right? We all know about the product ChatGPT, and some people think it's magic. Other people know a little bit how it works, but regardless, what is a fact is that the large language model that ChatGPT relies on could not possibly operate without a huge data set, right? And that the data set that's used for that is language, right? It's text, it's syntax, right? It's just the words that you and I typically read on a page somewhere. That's what it collects as its own data. And it is able to function in the way that it can. Why? Because it has such a large data set that it's able to derive lots of really good insights from it. The same can be true in commercial real estate. The moment that the commercial real estate industry recognizes that it's got lots of data, although it might be, for lack of a better term, locked up or contained in different silos and used only by those different silos. Those are just small pieces of data, right? Those are small bits of data sets. And once we can combine all of that data together into one giant data set, then we can start to do something similar that ChatGPT does, which is rely on such an enormous volume of data that it can derive insights in a way that can't be done with just little bits of data. And hopefully that is an analogy that maybe will ring true with the industry, because by now if everybody in the industry hasn't at least tested out ChatGPT, then they definitely should. But once you do it, you recognize that what it returns can be very valuable to you, but that all is predicated on the idea that there's an enormous set of data behind it from which it's able to derive all that really good information. Same is true in commercial real estate.
I think that's a good place to drop off here. I think my hope is 3-4 years from now, we'll come back, listen to this, and a lot of what you're suggesting is we're bearing the fruits. I guess for better, for worse, buildings do tend to move a little slowly, and the stakeholders around it, but you're fighting the good fight. And so I'm excited for the part 2. Before we hop, where could folks find you?
So very simply, our website is AlphaRithm.ai. That's alpha, RITHM.ai. Please check us out. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got any needs for consulting, we'd love to talk to you about it, and keep an eye out for our flagship product that's coming soon. And that's where we are.
Serge, thanks so much. And thanks for hopping on.
Thank you very much, Jose. It was a pleasure.